Today, we talking BBNOs. So I listen to music. I'm a YouTuber. I understand YouTube culture. At least I used to. I don't really understand what's happening anymore. I know Kaizen Nat is a thing. So of course that means that I know who Baby No Money is. And maybe a lot of you know who he is. He's kind of been big for a while. But I feel like this year's probably his biggest year in terms of like really breaking through to a lot of people who are outside of kind of his audience. Partly because of the songs he's been making this year and last year, but also just because he's just a very good marketer in terms of like using the internet to his advantage. He's clearly somebody who, due to his age and due to kind of, I guess, the type of music he makes and the way he would like release it and stuff, he understands internet culture. He understands the power of internet culture. He doesn't look down upon things like social medias like TikTok and Instagram Reels and stuff, and he doesn't look down upon the maybe weirder communities online, or at least the communities that are maybe a bit more niche or a bit more like judged, like VTubers and YouTubers in general, I guess, and like furries and all that kind of weird stuff. He seems to be pretty understanding of just like people are people. Every interest has an audience, and specifically niche interests usually have more passionate audiences due to the, I guess, smaller audience, the more particular audience. I'm not going to go into explaining the internet in modern day and how cringe culture is stupid and we should all just accept and enjoy what we enjoy, etc., etc. But Baby No Money is a very interesting artist because he takes advantage of that, and he makes music which, for people who aren't on the internet and people who aren't, you know, into that whole idea of cringe being just a word and stuff like that, people really don't like. This is one of those artists who I believe has recently been fitted more into the term of coworker music, which is a whole different conversation, which I might make a video on one day. Who knows? Although there's definitely better videos out there online who understand it more and have a more interesting, you know, discussion point of it than me, which I probably shouldn't be saying, but here we are. But yeah, despite the weird artist that Baby No Money is and the weird responses he gets from different people, this year and last year was arguably the biggest year Baby No Money's ever had. I'm someone who has listened to all of his output on Spotify in terms of like albums and EPs and stuff. He's also one of the few artists that I've seen live. That said, I'm not like a die-hard fan of him. It's just somebody who I do enjoy the music of, I do find interesting. I find his online presence interesting, and he seems like a pretty decent dude, hopefully. Please don't prove me wrong on that. It was interesting to go back and listen to all of his projects, because when you start off with, you know, the early stuff like Baby Steps and Recess, you can kind of hear that he's not fully confident in himself yet and in his sound and in his identity musically. Especially on like the first Baby Gravy, you can hear that him compared to Young Gravy, they're definitely like on different levels in terms of like knowing their sound and knowing what their voice should sound like and how they should sound in a track. And I feel like I Don't Care at All moving forward, he definitely has a voice and a delivery style which shows that he's much more confident. I do think it takes probably until Eat Your Veggies where the music on each project is varying quite differently. I do feel like a lot of his older projects do tend to kind of meld together in terms of like each song on a project kind of sounding quite samey, especially his older stuff. But that said, on all of his projects, there's always like a few songs which I really enjoy. There's always a few that are just maybe a bit more boring to me, but there's always a few which I think are great. Eat Your Veggies especially, even though I think it does have some air songs, I definitely think it has some of my favourite tracks of his on there. Bag or Die as well, I think is a similar story, although I think Bag or Die is slightly better than Eat Your Veggies. Obviously Baby Gravy 3 is a collab project, so not really going to be counting that fully. And this was a big project for Baby No Money because it was his self-titled album. I can theorize as to what inspired this decision, maybe because this year he's been releasing music that has been doing better than ever before in terms of like each single has been banging pretty well. There's been a few that haven't done extremely well, but they've all done good. There's been a lot of singles for this project pre-release, which we'll go into in a second, and almost all of them blew up on TikTok or had some kind of like moment to shine, right? But to be fair, you go through his album titles and you've heard what I've said so far, you know, Eat Your Veggies, Bag or Die, Good Luck, Have Fun, I Don't Care at All, Reset. There's literally one called I Don't Care at All. And I think the album titles is kind of like representative of the music that Baby No Money makes, and it shows a picture of like why a lot of people probably don't like him, which is that this isn't high art. And it isn't meant to be, you know? These songs are just meant to be listened to and enjoyed. If you're looking for deep lyrical content, if you're looking for sounds that push the needle, you're not gonna find it. But if you're just here for music that sounds good and you're willing to like turn your brain off and just not be so critical, you're probably gonna enjoy some of the stuff. And by the way, this isn't me insulting Baby No Money. This isn't like me saying his stuff is shit. Because I generally really don't believe that. I really do like this album, as well as a lot of his past projects and a lot of his past songs. Like I said, I've seen him live, for God's sake. I just feel like the conversations around Baby No Money and Art is similar. I just feel like the way that Baby No Money's music is often fit into this, like I said, co-worker music thing, some of the criticisms seem to be from, the fact that the lyrics aren't that good and all that kind of stuff. When even in interviews himself, you can see that this isn't really a priority for Alex, which is his name, by the way. If you listen to the music, you can tell that the concentration is on if the production is good, if the beats are good, if the flow is good, and if this is just the song is fun and feels good to listen to. His lyrics are just essentially filling in the flow. And I think that's an interesting way of making music. And if you're, upfront about that and you aren't trying to pretend that you're some lyrical genius, what's the harm in that? Like when It Boy, which is the first song that really kind of kicked off this era before the album release, came out and had the like Gen Z Eminem line in, I think a lot of the backlash of that was obviously not real. But I think there was some genuine people I saw on Twitter being like, what the fuck? This is stupid. And it's like, yeah, of course it is. He doesn't think that. These two artists are not comparable in any way. They're not making music in the same ballpark or genre or purpose at all. And like I said, Alex has said this on an interview talking about like he thought it was a stupid lyric, but he found it funny and decided to keep it in. And that's what a lot of the lyrics are on these kind of projects. I do think a lot of criticisms of this album and artist come from the fact as well that you can deem a lot of his music TikTok music, which I do think is true, especially for this album beyond the rest of them. As much as the term TikTok music, I use it, sometimes as well, but like I don't have any really meaning to it, non-derogatory meaning. A lot of time it can just be a song that existed and just happened to go viral on TikTok, so you're so used to hearing just a specific part of it. I consider a lot of Sabrina Carpenter's music. I keep mentioning her on this channel. I will talk about her at some point. I do like her, just trust me. But like I remember like in my head deeming a lot of her music like made for TikTok, because I'd always hear just like choruses or like pre-choruses and hooks and stuff in TikTok trends that would always like not represent the final song at all, and it always felt to me like, oh, they're adding these little bits in as the TikTok point to feed you into the actual music, which is quite different. But I was wrong. If you listen to the entire songs of a lot of Sabrina Carpenter stuff, it's not made for TikTok. It's just a well-structured song that people just tend to gravitate towards certain areas. However, with this album especially, and with Baby No Money's music in general more in the modern day, it is definitely made in a way to cater to TikTok and to have bits that are, catchy and easily repeatable and easily fit into some kind of trend, usually thirst traps, which again I think is somewhat a marketing tactic, and somewhat just because he knows that a lot of his audience are online, are on TikTok, make TikTok content. And again, it's that thing of like, is that actually an issue? Like I feel like we're kind of not programmed, but because of like the culture that TikTok has, or maybe had, I guess is the better way of saying it, coming from Musical.ly and stuff, there's like this easy like jumping point to like anything TikTok related, anything that got big because of TikTok, because of how awful that app is in a lot of ways. And a lot of creators on there are just like predatory and weird. Anything that spawns from there, it's kind of like an immediate like reaction of like, oh god, I don't like that. I don't want to like that. But I don't think that's necessarily fair. It's such a wide platform at this point. It really should be a case to case basis. But let's talk about the sound of the album, shall we? Because I haven't really been doing that much. Sorry, I like to yap. You should know that by now. This is definitely the most unique sound I think Baby No Money has had. Yeah, especially in the singles for the album. It's the most like highly like artificially produced and stuff his projects have ever sounded. Which, by the way, don't get me wrong, isn't bad. I think it's interesting, and like I said, It Boy being the first single that released, and I think he like teased it on someone's stream or something. When that like first like bassy beat drop kind of happened in the song, I was like, ooh, this is different. Interesting. I wonder if this is going to work for him or not. And I think overall it did. And I am quite surprised that like I like this project as much as I do. In the respect that like when It Boy came out, I was like, okay, this is alright, but do I want a whole project of this? But then the more singles that released, which by the way, a lot of singles released for this project, each of them had a similar vibe, but also stood out enough and changed enough that I did really enjoy them. To the extent that I would say It Boy is probably one of my favorite songs on the project overall. But speaking about singles, this album technically had 15 singles, but if we don't count the songs that just didn't make the album, it probably had about 12. And that sounds like a lot, which it is. But this album is 21 songs and 50 minutes long, which is the longest project that he has made. Again, maybe that contributes to the whole self-titled aspect of the album. I personally think this isn't the way to go. As much as I like this album, I like a lot of the songs on the album, I do think that the original half an hour runtime of a lot of his previous projects was probably the way to keep it, because as much as I do enjoy this album, I do get bored towards the end. That said, I do enjoy practically every song on this, and like I actually quite enjoy a lot of them. Are you ready for me to say some funny phrases? Back the Fuck Up is a fun beginner track. I think it probably would have fit a little bit more on Bag or Die in terms of like, you know, that's what that album is called. But you know, I think it's a good beginner. If I had to say what my favourite tracks on this album were, I would probably say a lot of them did end up being singles, to be honest with you. Gigolo and 1-800 are my favourites by far. They're just really high energy and fun, and I think like you could say that for a lot of the songs on this album, to be honest with you. But I think they are quite unique, and I don't think there's many artists who make songs like this, at least like to the way he does. Eat, Slay, Love is fun, although I do think it's a bit repetitive, and the career, I think is how you say it. I know he's the cha-cha-cha guy, don't worry. I love this man. I do think that feature kind of saves the song. I do kind of wish that he had more of a presence on the song and it felt a bit more like a back and forth, kind of like his songs with Baby Gravy do. That said, I'm glad he's here. The other features on the project are Iron Mouse, I think, who was a VTuber, who was on 1-800, who I think really works for that hook. And Vanilla, which is like a kind of similar, like chopped up hook for Bing Bong, which I think is fun. It Boy, like I said, is quite an important track for the album because the phrase like It Boy comes up quite a lot in the rest of the songs. But I do feel like it's not my favourite, and I think the more I listen to it, the less I like it, which I think is different for a lot of songs on this project. A lot of them that I didn't like to begin with have kind of grown on me. For example, the weird Brazilian segments of this album, which I didn't expect. Like, I listened to this album on release, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess there's like a Brazilian inspiration for some of these songs, which I'm not against at all. It's just really shocking because it doesn't really work with the rest of the sonic sound of the album. You've got Estrella, you've literally got Come to Brazil. I would even say that Pump It and Rich, Sexy, Ugly have vibes of that as well. I think all these songs are fine. They're pretty, like, they're good, but I think I don't like them as much, partly because they just feel like they don't fit, but also they're just maybe not not my favorites. To be honest, I would say that like past Not Safe for Work I could do without. Not entirely though, to be fair. Like this is a weird album. I feel like you could cut quite a few of them and I would like it a lot more, but I'm not gonna suggest that really, which is weird because they are like singles, like I said, that didn't make the album. For example, Little Freak, I really enjoyed. I was hoping that'd be on the project. It was not, but instead it had to make way for ADD and Boom, two songs which I think are just too repetitive and don't work for me. Boom especially works for a lot of people, like that became a bit of a TikTok trend song for a while. But for me, those two songs I could definitely do without and definitely aren't ones I go back to. Where compared to a lot of the other songs in this album, which I'm not huge on, I at least respect them for what they are and they do seem to be doing something different. For example, like the Brazilian sound and stuff like that. But these two just feel a bit too like, yeah, let's do the same thing that worked and it doesn't work for me. But then again, if I didn't like any of the other songs, then I'd probably say the same thing about them. So I think it just maybe just doesn't work with me. Yes, sir. This is fun. Is it similar to me? I think it's just a bit repetitive and a bit boring. The only song that I would say has like a real point and purpose to it, which do sometimes happen like in these projects by him, that like there is at least like one or two songs which seem to actually have like a proper reason and like story behind, is Main Squeeze, where it's like just like a kind of love song, which again isn't breaking ground but for Baby No Money that doesn't really happen very often. Like he's done songs like Feel in the past, but obviously like I said, 21 songs, that's the only song that really has kind of an actual topic, so he can do it and it is nice when he does it, but I think if he moved over fully to that, I think it would lose the magic of the artist that he is. But overall, I would just say that it's a fun project. I know I use that word a lot, but it is just a fun, high energy project, and that is what I'd say about Baby No Money in general. It is just like a fun, high energy artist who has just, you know, weird shit and weird lines and silly lines and a bit of comedy thrown in and internet references and concentrating solely on just trying to sound good. I don't think is a problem at all, and I think, you know, if you go in just wanting to hear stuff that sounds good, you don't really care about the lyrics and the lyrical content, you will enjoy it. Similar to like if you listen to something like K-pop or like just a song in a different language, like you're forced in that circumstance to just completely cut out the lyrical content, because unless you're reading translated lyrics, you don't know what is being said, and it brings you down to just the fundamental of does this feel good to my ears? Am I enjoying the sound of this? Does it make me want to bob my head or dance a little bit? Or like, does it flow well? Does it hit the points it feels like it's intending to? And I would say that most of this project, it definitely does. Like I said, there's definitely a few songs I would cut out. But that said, this is more of a compilation than an album, like in terms of the vibe it gives. And to be fair, a lot of his albums kind of end up being that. But yeah, I'm interested to see where he goes from here. You know, where do you go from a self-titled project? Hopefully it doesn't quit. He's a fun artist to follow, and I do like seeing what he gets up to. It's always funny seeing where he pops up, you know, collaborating with like YouTubers like Jay Schlatt and Ethan, it was nice to see Ethan doing something, you know, popping up on random live streams and going to conventions, wearing weird cosplays, or popping up in random TikTokers that you've seen a few videos from, and you're like, that's pretty funny, and then all of a sudden BBNO Money's also seen those videos and is in them. It's fun, and I think music can just be fun. It doesn't have to be something so serious. It doesn't mean that serious music is bad. It's nice to have music that has messages and makes you think and makes you cry or makes you feel. But it's also nice just sometimes to have music that makes you want to do a little jig, you know? So yes, if this makes me a co-worker, then I'll see you on Monday at 9 o'clock. Is that how I'm ending the video?